the dead of night, full of echo. Concrete jungle, dreams bust to grow. Mets in the air, chase glory, no fear. Broken backs, but hearts steer clear. OMG, the chaos, what a scene. Streets buzzing like a machine. Critters from the shadows, chills on my spine. Past haunts, the future shine. Comebacks in the night, keep dreams alive. Fighting tooth and nail just to survive. City's heartbeat echoes in our chant. Grit and glory is all we want. Brooklyn to Queens, hear the roar. From laughter to blood in every scar. Living legends made on this ground. From silence we scream, make a sound. Rising high, falling low, repeat again. Cycles of the game, addicted to the pen. Graffiti tales spray on the wall. Mets saga, forever stand tall. Rivals smear, but we push on through. Every heartbeat bleeds, orange and blue. Grimace fades, turn into a storm. In the Mets family, we are reborn.
Welcome to Talkin' Mets with Rob. Subscribe to the channel for all your New York Mets in-game live, pre-game, post-game, round-table podcast, and all the breaking news for our New York Mets. Enjoy the show and let's go Mets.
What's up, Mets fans? Welcome to a very special breaking news right here on the channel as the New York Mets bolster their bullpen by getting flame-throwing lefty A.J. Minter to 2 years, $22 million with the opt-out after the first year. This is a good move. This is a move. This is a Stearns type of move. I told you guys from the beginning, don't worry about David Stearns when it comes to the bullpen. He gets it done when it comes to the bullpen. Can't speak about anything else. The lineup, the starting pitching, that's something that is still yet to be determined yet. The roster is still being developed here later in this offseason. Excuse me. But this is a good move. This is a solid move, especially if you're going to go in with the rotation that we currently have. You got to bolster the bullpen. You got to have a solid to elite bullpen going into the season. And this is a good start with A.J. Minter. Now, I do not believe that the Mets are out on Tanner Scott. I think Minter clearly can be a bridge guy to Edwin Diaz. He can be an eighth inning guy. He can close occasionally as well, but I wouldn't be shocked if the Mets still go after Tanner Scott. I mean, they could go after Kirby Yates, which is another good option on the right side of the mound. They could still go after, bring back Stanek, maybe even Robinson, something like that as well. But this is a really, really good move for the New York Mets. This is a extremely solid move. And again, this is needed here because what does this do? Now, this gives the potential of everybody sliding back a little bit in the bullpen, right? Reed Garrett gets slid down. Nunez gets slid down. Buto gets slid down. Possibly a sixth man in the rotation. If all reports are the Mets are going to really go hard after elite and strong bullpen arms. This is only the beginning. If they get Stanek, if they get Tanner Scott, that means Jose Buto is available to go in this rotation as part of the six-man rotation. This is a good move. This is a start. Now, is it possible that the Mets get Stanek or even Robinson and Tanner Scott? And now, again, Buto is expendable now because you still got Reed Garrett. You still got Daniel Nunez. This is a good bullpen. And I said it from the beginning before the Mets make any move in the bullpen as of today. Already you have Jose Buto, you got Nunez, you got Garrett, you got Diaz. That is four solid names in your bullpen before you even make any moves. Adding A.J. Minter to this is excellent. Is a really good start. Now, I think you need at least one more guy that is almost at a Minter level, if not better. And I think the Mets in on Tanner Scott. There is no doubt about that, 100%. And again, there was a report, I think it was a Red Sox reporter, who says the Mets are very much in Tanner Scott and AJ Minter. Like, he said that, 100%. He said that. And there's a real possibility that it's going to be a right-hander. You know the Mets are going to get at least one more right-hander. If that's Stanek, Chris is saying in the chat, Robinson, Canely, Yates. There's a lot of guys they can go after here. And again, don't forget, guys, 6 p.m., we have Mets Hot Stove. Now, I have to change my topics again because the topics were Scott Minter and all types of other combinations here. So I got to change up my topics, but that's okay. That's the fun part about it. As long as the Mets get better, I'll change my topics 100 times today, if need be, before 6 o'clock. But exactly, James. Chris has said it for probably episode 1 of Mets Hot Stove. He talked about AJ Minter, right? Yeah, we talked about Tanner Scott. We didn't think that was we thought that was fantasy land, Tanner Scott. Now, it might not be. Now, is it possible the Mets didn't like the years and the number for Tanner Scott, and they pivoted to AJ Minter? Possible. But if the Mets are really going to go big in the bullpen, you go big. You get Tanner Scott. You go get a Canely, a Yates, a Stanek. You do that. There is no way in hell you stop here. You get this bullpen. Again, there was a pretty good chance you needed at least 2 arms, possibly 3 in the bullpen, right? And I think David Stearns wants 2 lefties in his bullpen. I've said that for a while. They tried to do it with, certain lefties with Raley, but it never worked out because nobody was ever good enough as a lefty other than Raley. If you can get Minter and Tanner Scott, you got a 7, 8, 9. That's the best in baseball. Sorry to say, it's the best in baseball. And that's not even including Nunez and Garrett and possibly Buto. But what this does is, if this sets up for a Tanner Scott, Minter, and let's say Stanek offseason for the bullpen, that means Jose Buto will be in the rotation as a 6th man, one of the 6 guys in the rotation. And I'd be fine with that. I don't like to move Buto when you kind of need him in the bullpen. But if you get Minter, Scott, and say Stanek for this bullpen, Buto is very expendable and can go to the rotation. And now we're talking about a rotation that has some hope, that has a lot more plus side than they currently have. And I think that's where we are right now. So again, the Mets, right after the news came out that the Mets and Pete Alonso are seeming like they're parting ways, the Mets signed Jesse Winker, 1 year, $8 million. And today, about a half hour ago, they signed AJ Minter to 2 years, $22 million with an opt-out after the first year. So I want to make that clear to everybody. With an opt-out after the first year. Again, a lot of these relievers, especially Minter, who had a little bit of he was injured a little bit this year, but still pitched well, is a guy that, can easily be an 8th inning or even a closer. If he has an outstanding year, he's going to go back on the market and try to get closer type money. So this is a really good deal. It is strategic here. And again, this is why I was so upset about the Pete Alonso situation, because you've seen how it stalled what the Mets were trying to do. Now, people can say, well, why don't you just go after Pete Alonso and still get Winker and still get Minter? Because Alonso was a big decision for the New York Mets, right? That is $20+ million you're giving to a player. Right now, the Mets just spent around, at the moment, $19 million between Winker and Minter, right? They still got around $30 to $40 million to play with, give or take, right? From that third threshold, that tax threshold. So there's a strong possibility that they're definitely going to do more. And again, it is a possibility, and I know Jeremy's saying, Tanner Scott's not going to the Mets. Well, it was only reported an hour before the Minter signing went down that the Mets are in on Tanner Scott and AJ Minter. So they're in on them. And an hour later, Minter's a Met. So again, this is a possibility where the Mets saw what Tanner Scott was looking for, 4 years, possibly $20 million per year, and they weren't comfortable doing that when they have Diaz making closer money. Now they could still do it. We'll see. They could have pivoted to AJ Minter, which again, you could do a lot worse than AJ Minter, right? If you're not going to get Tanner Scott, AJ Minter is perfectly fine. He's going to be a bridge guy to Edwin Diaz. He's a lefty, which is even better. He gets righties and lefties out at a very similar clip, so it's no bad sign there when it comes to righty or lefty bats against him. So that's a good sign. And when Diaz is not available, Minter can step in as a closer. So that's a possibility. But again, if the Mets are, again, I think his name is Chris Colito. He's a Red Sox beat reporter. And again, why is he talking about the Mets? Because the Red Sox were going to look at these pitchers as well. So that's why it is a possibility. Excuse me. Sorry, guys. I got allergies all over the place here. I do think that it is a possibility that the Mets still could be in on Tanner Scott. If you're going to go big in the bullpen, and this is the rotation that you have, and the Mets want Butto to go back into the rotation, then you have to get 2 more arms. And why not get the best available reliever on the market? AJ Minter was probably, I would say, the top, 5 reliever on the market. Like he was pretty good. He did get injured last year, but he was still pretty good when he pitched. And I want to pull up the numbers really quickly. Give me a second. Let me just pull up AJ Minter. All right, here we go. Excuse me. So last year he had a 2.62 ERA. Yeah, I think we take that. He pitched in 39 games. Again, he probably could have pitched in more. He consistently pitches between 60 and 75 games over the last 3 seasons. So last year he pitched 39 games. He pitched only 34 innings, gave up 10 earned runs. The home runs were 6, which is right on par from what he did the previous couple of years. His strikeouts, if you add another 30 appearances, he's around the strikeout range, around 60, 70, 80, which is right up his alley. The walks is actually down, but if you go through another 30 games appearances, he would be right around the walk. So everything has been the same, other than he was injured last year. But again, he has an elite arm. He's a power arm. He's a lefty. This is a good sign. And again, I'm not going to go crazy if they pivoted from Tanner Scott to AJ Minter, because what you were looking for here is somebody to bridge the gap to Edwin Diaz. You want to move Garrett down. You want to move Nunez down. So you can have Garrett 6, Nunez 7, Minter 8, Diaz 9, and still have the opportunity to put in Butto. And even if you get a Stanek or a Canely or a Yates or a pitcher like that, or Robinson for that matter, you can throw Butto in the rotation. And I wonder if the Mets are thinking about that with Jose Butto. Because if you throw Jose Butto in this rotation, it makes a difference, because Butto did pitch well when he was a starter. They just didn't want to extend him as a starter. So it was kind of pointless, in my opinion, last year to do that when you were only getting 4 innings, sometimes 5, but mostly 4 innings, and you were losing the good pitching in Butto, and you were still hurting your bullpen. So now, if you get more bullpen help and you get solid arms, Butto does not need to be in the bullpen, and you can go into the rotation, and now you got a 6-man rotation. You got Senga, you got Minaya, you got Peterson, you got Montas, you got Holmes, and now you would have Jose Butto. So you would have your 6-man rotation that the David Stearns and the Mets want. So that is not a bad idea. That is not bad at all. So again, just for everybody just tuning in, if you haven't heard, the Mets signed lefty reliever AJ Minter to a 2-year, $22 million deal, and there's an opt-out after the first year. So $11 million this year, and we'll see what happens when it comes to if he opts out. But again, we don't know that, but who cares? He has a great season. Let him opt out. I mean, he's probably going to do it if he has a good season anyway. Yeah, well, easy. Yeah, and Blackburn too, right? Blackburn could be, he might be here at the end of May, but that gives him time to, recover and to prepare and have a spring training, and you don't have to rush him back because the Mets need a starter. So that's a good sign for Blackburn. He don't have to rush back. Yeah, I mean, Finnegan's an option. Leclerc is an option as well. Like, you can really do that There's so many options with the bullpen. And that's why I said, guys, I wasn't concerned. I know a lot of people in the chat over the 26 hot stoves we already had. And by the way, 6 p.m. tonight, episode 27 of Mets Hot Stove. And we have a ton of topics, more topics than we ever had on the hot stove because, well, things are picking up. The Pete Alonso situation is kind of out the window, possibly. And there's so much more to talk about. So obviously I got to change my topics because Minter and Scott was a topic. Now I just got to change it up a little bit, but hey, it is what it is. So I think the fact that, Steven, I don't think Buto, you're going to screw him up, put him back in the bullpen or put him back as a starter because if you know going into spring training, your bullpen is, let's say it is only AJ Minter and it's not Tanner Scott. Let's say if it's Minter, Stanek, and Canely. That's okay. Right? There's more than enough bullpen arms in there where Buto can go into the rotation. If you start Buto and stretch him out when spring training starts, he's going to be fine. Like, I don't like moving him during the season, even though the Mets had no choice last year. They had to do it to make him from a starter to a bullpen arm because they needed it. If you stretch him out in spring training, he's going to be fine for the season. So it is a good signing. I don't think the Mets are done at any stretch. I think they're still in on Tanner Scott. There can be an argument saying that maybe they pivoted from Tanner Scott because of the money in the years and moved to AJ Minter, which is, again, that is a very damn good plan B if you were going after Tanner Scott. So it's no problem at all. I like the signing. Can Yates get $11 million too? Yeah, I mean, spread out the money, right? Just look what happened here, right? And you already see it happening. The $23 million they were going to give Pete Alonso for this year, they put it onto a solid a really good bullpen arm, and Jesse Winker, who is, I think, was important to come back. And he fits the Mets perfectly. He can DH, he can play the corner outfields, and he brings that attitude, which I think is very important for this team. Like, there was a reason why Jose Iglesias and Jesse Winker were kind of like the lightning rods of this team. When Winker came here, the Mets finally had some attitude, right? Iglesias kind of loosened up the room a little bit with his flair and his OMG and all that stuff. Jesse Winker brought some grit to this Mets team. Like, and I think that's needed, right? Winker can be the bad guy, right? Winker can be hated by other teams and fans. He don't care. And Iglesias is the happy-go-lucky guy. That's what it was last year, and I think Winker's going to do that again. And plus, he's a decent bat, especially if you're going to hold on to Marte and platoon him at DH spot with Winker, depending on if there's a lefty or a righty on the mound. Mark, we don't need Pete. I think we got to understand that Pete Alonso isn't the end-all, be-all with the Mets, right? We've lost a lot with Pete Alonso as well. Right. And again, I'm sick and tired of talking about, like, I can't wait until Pete Alonso signs elsewhere, because when he does, Met fans will cry and bitch and moan for about 48 hours. And then the Mets will make more moves. And I still think they're going to bring in another bat in here. And I still think, and we'll talk about this in the hot stove at 6:00. I think it's going to be Bregman or Santander. One of those guys are going to be a New York Met. It only makes sense because you keep on hearing that the Mets are more like the fact that Vientos can play first base. They want a better defensive third baseman at third base. And anybody defensively, again, Mauricio hasn't played a lot of third. Acuna hasn't played a lot of third. Jet Williams hasn't played a lot of third. So I don't think when you say you want to go better defensively at third base, none of those guys are probably better, or you don't know if those guys are better than Vientos. Because Vientos was pretty good at third base. Not great, but pretty good. Vientos can go to first base. You sign Alex Bregman, you put him at third base. Again, guys, you lose Pete Alonso, but you gain Alex Bregman and Juan Soto in your lineup. Your lineup is automatically better. Why do I say that? Right? Oh, where are you going to get the production from Pete Alonso? All right, let's say if Pete Alonso would hit 42 home runs, 120 RBIs. You'll get 20 to 25 home runs from Bregman, 30 home runs from Soto, that is already 55 home runs. Let's say they have about 90 to 95 RBIs apiece. That's already 190 RBIs. So you're going to hit around 20 more home runs than Pete Alonso while lengthening your lineup, and you're going to have about 50 to 60, even 70 more RBIs in your lineup. So you're lengthening your lineup with a Bregman and Soto, and you're already gaining that production that Pete Alonso would for one player, and his clutch numbers suck. And you get Juan Soto, who is clutch as clutch can be, as we all watched last year with the Yankees. And we know about Alex Bregman, how clutch he was. His clutch numbers are outstanding. Outstanding. Now, I know last year they were a little bit down. But again, everybody talks about, well, I want to see Pete Alonso with Soto and Vientos. Well, what do you think? It's not going to help Bregman? Of course it's going to help Bregman. Bregman never had a Juan Soto. Bregman never had this amount of power and around him. Like, yeah, he had Alvarez for sure, but a lot of the times, and me and Chris talked about this a couple of weeks ago, that Bregman actually batted behind Yordan Alvarez more than he batted in front of him. So the potential of Bregman being in between Soto and Vientos, you would think he would see better pitches. He would have better at-bats. And that's where we are right now. So I do think the Mets could get Bregman. That is also a possibility. If the Mets are because again, every day we seem like there's a report that comes out, and legitimate reports, not bullshit reports, legitimate reports that the Mets are willing to move or seem like they want to move Vientos to first base so they can open up that third base spot. Mauricio is not going to be ready. All indications are he's not. So Mauricio is out. That was the only option I think he can go to internally is Mauricio. Acuna really hasn't played third base. Can he? Who knows? Jet Williams hasn't really played third base. He's basically short, second, and center field. Same thing with Acuna. So in that instance, I think if they're willing, if they're really dead set on moving Vientos to first base, because again, this sets you up for next offseason or a possible trade for Vladimir Guerrero Jr. I know that's not, it doesn't seem possible, but I'm sorry. That check-in is more than a check-in. There's something more to that, in my opinion. So we got the possibility of Vientos going to first base, signing Alex Bregman, and if the trade doesn't happen this year, at least you know next offseason when you go after Vlad Guerrero very hard, you can just put Vientos as the DH. And then when you want to give Bregman a day off or Vlad a day off and DH them, you can play Vientos in the field. Like that's the versatility that David Stearns likes. Pete Alonso was just a first baseman, right? And obviously he could DH. But Vientos can play third, can play first. Bregman can play third, but he also can play second. There was reports that he was willing to move to second base if need be, depending on the team he would go to. And the same thing with the other guys I mentioned, right? There's so many versatility factors. Why do you think Jesse Winker's back? Because he's versatile, right? AJ Minter is on this team now. You know why? Because he can pitch the 8th inning, the 7th inning, the 9th inning. That is why the Mets and David Stearns likes situational guys and guys that can play multiple positions. That is a big deal. D, you got to like the AJ Minter move. Again, there's more to come, right? And Robert, Tanner Scott's still a possibility. He's still out there, right? Again, before we end the stream, guys, because I got to fix my topics for the hot stove in 2 hours at 6 p.m. Make sure you're there. Listen, the fact is it possible that the Mets were in on Tanner Scott and they didn't like the 4, maybe 5 years? I'm not thinking 4 years at $20 million a year. Maybe they didn't like that. Maybe. We'll see. And maybe they were like, you know what? We're not going to do that. Let's get AJ Minter, which is perfectly fine. Like, I love Tanner Scott as well. Trust me. But if you pivot to AJ Minter, it's hard to say you did worse. You know, you did a lot worse. AJ Minter has been successful with the Braves for a couple of years now. He had a 2.62 ERA. He played at basically half a season. But again, he's going to pen physical. If he passes physical, I think the Mets are comfortable with that. And we needed a lefty. And if you do get Tanner Scott, now you're really talking. Now you can do whatever you want with the next right-hander in your bullpen, wherever you might get a Canely, a Robinson, a Yates, a Stanek, guys like that. So, and the other thing, guys, is that Chris Cotillo, I think his name is, he's a beat reporter for the Red Sox. The reason why he brought up, and he did it, like, it was so funny because I messaged it, I shared it to Chris, and I was like, yo, look at this stuff. Oh, I think Chris sent it to me. And it was like he was like, the Mets are heavily pursuing Tanner Scott and AJ Minter, or focusing in on big bullpen arms, Minter and Scott. And not even an hour later, the Mets signed Minter. Now, that could be a situation where they were going after Scott, but it's too much and they didn't like the numbers and moved to Minter. But I don't necessarily believe that, because I think David Stearns knows how important a bullpen is. So we'll see, but we'll have a lot to talk about on the hot stove at 6 p.m. Make sure you hit that notification, guys. Head over to that stream. Again, if you wait when I end the stream, it's going to take you right to that hot stove stream. Hit on that like button early so more people can tune in and hang out with us. This is the most topics we have had on the hot stove since we started it this offseason. So it's going to be a lot of topics, a lot of talking points. Obviously, the Winker signing, obviously the Minter signing, and then what else in this plan B that the Mets are working on. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. Did they? Oh, so Mike Puma did say that they're out on Scott. So, okay, that does make sense then. That absolutely makes sense. I understand that 100%. Let me just double check before we call it quits. Let's see. All right, so thank you, Crooklyn. AJ Minter's addition to the Mets bullpen likely means they won't further pursue Tanner Scott, I am hearing. Team officials recently met with Scott, who was considered the top reliever on the free agent market. Again, he said likely. So, again, that is a possibility. That's why I wanted to throw that out there prior to seeing that. And thank you, Crooklyn, for mentioning that before I head out. But, again, Minter's a perfect setup man and can close. So, yeah, I would love Tanner Scott. But if it is Minter, and they wanted to do that because they weren't comfortable with the 4 years, whatever $1 million it was for Tanner Scott, go get Yates and get 2 more bullpen arms, solid bullpen arms. Minter had a 2.62 ERA last year. That's better than almost every Met on the team last year. So, all right, guys. So, once again, Mets signed AJ Minter, 2 years, $22 million with opt out after the first year, so $11 million per. And don't forget, guys, 6 p.m., me and Chris, episode 27 of Mets Hot Stove. A ton of topics on the show, so make sure you tune in, guys. Wait when I end the stream, guys. It's going to take you right over to the Hot Stove stream. Hit that like button, guys. So, Mets get a reliever. Let's see what they have up cooking next. Right after the Alonso news went down that the Mets and him are parting ways, most likely, the Mets have signed Jesse Winker and AJ Minter. The Mets are cooking. Hot Stove heating up, 6 p.m., Mets Hot Stove, myself and Chris. Tune in, guys. I'll see you later tonight. Let's go Mets. AJ Minter is a New York Met. See you later, guys, at 6 p.m. Good night, guys.
Welcome to Talkin' Mets with Rob. Subscribe to the channel for all your New York Mets in-game live, pre-game, post-game, roundtable podcast, and all the breaking news for our New York Mets. Enjoy the show and let's go Mets.